Hello, students. My name is Efosela, and I'll be taking you for introduction to African and non-African philosophies. And before I delve into today's lecture, I just want to briefly take you through the course outline and what to expect in this course. It's rather unfortunate that we have to be taking part of this course through online lectures. I like to interact with my students in a live physical session so that we can engage in discussions, debates, arguments, ideas about philosophical teachings from all over the world. But this is the situation we find ourselves in, so we have to um, try to manage with the online lectures and follow along with the readings as best as we can. Okay, so this course is primarily meant to introduce you students of broadcast journalism to philosophical thoughts in African and non-African cultures, with an emphasis on the relationship between philosophy and culture and its relevance to contemporary African issues and developments. And the topics we'll be discussing includes African cosmologies, indigenous knowledge systems, religion and concept of God, deities, ancestors. We also look at ideas of witchcraft, evil. We'll look at political thought, African identity, values, art and aesthetics, and the concept of being. We'll look at destiny. We'll also look at ethics, morality, gender, and issues in race and identity. Okay, and I mentioned aesthetics because it also is a core part of what philosophy is all about. It's mainly philosophy of arts. We look at um, art appreciation and art criticism, and all these areas that I mentioned in one way or the other forms a core part of some branch of philosophy or a combination of several branches. And since this is an undergraduate course, we'll just touch on the introductory parts of these various branches briefly so that you get a general overview of philosophical ideas in different branches from different cultures, because it's not just limited to African culture but non-African societies as well. And the concepts that will be required for you to apply throughout the course is fairly simple. It's your ability to really think around issues critically, using a lot of your own judgments, critique, logical reasoning, and critical thinking skills to really try to understand some of the issues that we'll be discussing, because philosophy requires you to do a lot of serious contemplation, reflection, and thinking. And to do this, you need what we call some tools of philosophy. Okay, we'll look at all these areas, and this course will really help you as a broadcast journalist to understand other, people's cultures, other traditions from a very objective stance, so that when you are really trying to deliberate on issues in your professional practice, you can be a really serious minded individual, independent thinker, and somebody who can really use their independence critical thinking skills to seriously analyze issues. Okay, and you should be able to apply African philosophy and indigenous knowledge systems in your professional practice as a broadcast journalist. And when you are done with this course, you definitely develop a true sense of your personhood or your African identity, and you also be able to learn how to apply logic and critical thinking skills in making some basic decisions, not only in your professional practice but also in life, because philosophy teaches you to be um, someone who can live life successfully, because you are equipped with all the critical thinking skills to take you through life. So it's this is a lifelong journey. It might just be a course for 2 semesters, but some of the ideas and the issues and the concepts you learn in this philosophy class can possibly take you through life. Okay, and the just a second. I just want to, yes. So for week 1, we just look at the introductory ideas and concepts in philosophy. We'll look at the basics, preparing your mind for a lifelong passion for wisdom and knowledge acquisition. And philosophy, in its most basic idea or concept, is really about having a passion for knowledge acquisition, the love of wisdom, the love of learning, and more of a journey for a lifelong passion for education. Okay, so philosophy requires you to do a lot of learning and knowledge acquisition, which comes with some level of self-discipline. When I say self-discipline, you should always make a constant effort in getting access to new information and learning. And the basic requirements for being a student of philosophy is to read. And when I say read, I'm not just referring to online blogs or newspaper articles and all that. We are speaking of deep, intensive reading, and you're going to do a lot of reading throughout this course. So if you have problems with reading or trying to finish books, you might want to take it as a personal hobby to be reading, even things outside the readings that will be given to you in this course, because that's like the basic requirement for doing philosophy. You need to be an avid reader, because you're collecting knowledge from different cultures, different disciplines, different areas, and forming this into an organized, coherent body of knowledge to enable you be a very solid philosopher. Okay, and the various branches that we'll be looking at in the forthcoming lectures includes metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, aesthetics, existentialism, cosmology, and all that. And these are some of the areas I've already mentioned, but they broadly fall under either any of these branches that I've mentioned. Okay, but to begin on a very light note, philosophy has been an area of interest to many cultures, many societies, and different groups of people. But then when you are reading from um, some of these Western books, it appears as if philosophy was only practiced or um, demonstrated in Western societies, or particularly the Greeks. They claim to have invented philosophical thinking and all that. But of course, if you follow through with some of the readings, I'll give you like the book by George James, The Stolen Legacy. In fact, that the Greeks themselves admitted in their writings that they came to learn philosophy from ancient Kemet, which you know today as Egypt. Okay, you know about the great library of Alexandria, which was burnt down in ancient times. Okay, so philosophy exists in almost every culture, every society. You can't say the practice of philosophy exists in Western society and is non-existent in non-Western societies. And philosophy is actually an activity that you engage in, that you practice, but it involves doing or taking certain actions that leads to certain results. So we'll think of philosophy in terms of an activity or an action that you engage in. Okay. All right. So to begin with, there's a series of articles that you must read to prep you before we even start the course, and it's important for you to understand some very basic rules of doing philosophy and writing philosophical essays for your assignments. Rule number one is to avoid any form of plagiarism. We need to really get this off the record. Like we really need to set the record straight when it comes to doing assignments for a philosophy class. You can't afford to plagiarize information or text or material that has been written by someone else and pass it off as your own. And in the reading materials that I'll give to you, there's an article on plagiarism and what constitutes plagiarism and how to avoid it. Maybe in one of the live lecture sessions, I'll teach you how to do proper referencing, footnoting, and citing your sources very well for any essay or any assignment that you are given. Because when you go out there as broadcast journalists, you are expected to produce knowledge, produce information. You can't afford to pick information from somewhere and publish it on whatever media house you find yourself in and pass it off as your own without acknowledging or crediting the source of your information. So it's key to always acknowledge, credit, and cite your sources. That's one of the basic starters for you to prep your mind before you even start with the readings and the assignments that you'll be doing. Okay. And there's an article by Neil O'Donnell called "Being a Guide to Being a Student of Philosophy." Maybe when you read through that article, you can understand some of the basic ideas of how to structure and formulate your essays, how to reference, how to do bibliography and all that. These are really important for you to understand before you start producing your assignment, because if you give me your assignment and I see traces of plagiarism, it means that you are really not understanding what this whole course is about, because you're supposed to produce knowledge, and knowledge should be a demonstration of you using your critical thinking skills and applying some of the ideas you learn in the philosophy class. Okay. Sorry, the book is by Dr. Rainer Olafsson. I'll put it in the Google Drive and share with all of you. Okay. And there's another article by Immanuel Kant titled "What is Enlightenment?" And I'll just speak about this article briefly and why it's important for you to um, open up your mind to acquire knowledge. And in this essay, it's a really short essay by Immanuel Kant. It's just a 4-page essay. And in the essay, he speaks about how it's important for people to use their own knowledge, their own critical thinking skills to generally make very sound decisions without relying on any particular person or guidance from anyone. Now, this approach is quite tricky because somebody might ask, so um, should I not seek advice or guidance from somebody who is more experienced than myself or somebody who is more knowledgeable than myself? And the answer is both yes and no in a way. Why? Because philosophy teaches you to break away from that style of thinking where you have to always rely on someone to give you knowledge to be able to make decisions. And that's what Immanuel Kant says obstructs your path to being an enlightened person. Because according to him, if you depend on the pastor to give you an explanation for something you don't understand, if you expect your teacher to always feed you with information in order for you to make some basic decisions, then you are not really using all your mental faculties. That's why even when I teach you, I expect you to go a step further and do more research about the things that you've been taught, so that even if the teacher is saying things that are not accurate, you can be able to use your own critical thinking skills to really try to understand what the subject matter is all about. Because I can come to you as a teacher or as a lecturer giving you all this information, but there might be some new information somewhere that I myself haven't uncovered, and you might possibly have access to that information. Okay, so that's why Kant is saying that we don't really have to be under someone's guidance to be able to be enlightened. So it teaches you to be an independent thinker. Philosophy teaches you to be an independent thinker. It's more about having courage to use your own reasoning skills and your own critical thinking abilities. That's why you're taking this course, so that you become independent thinkers. After you've taken this course and you do your own further readings, further research, you should be able to develop your own system of thinking, your own independent philosophical thoughts and all that. So it's a very interesting article by Immanuel Kant, and it's part of the readings that you'll be required to read for week one's lecture. There's another book that will be part of the reading list by Marcus Garvey. The title is Message to the People, and in this book, that's the first chapter, lesson 1. Marcus Garvey speaks of how important knowledge acquisition is, especially to black people, and he sees knowledge acquisition as a roadmap to really developing yourself and also forming a true sense of your identity. Why? Because a lot of our education throughout our upbringing is largely, structured around a colonial curriculum, and it's important for you as a student to really take a roadmap to do a lot of unlearning some of the ideas that you've been taught from your childhood right onto this stage. You can think of all the nursery rhymes that you've learned, and the European storybooks that you've read, the European history and all that, it becomes important for you to do some retrospective glance and take a keen interest in your culture, your people, your religion, your identity, your social group, and all those things that were missing in your educational journey, right from when you started schooling till now. So Marcus Garvey speaks of certain guidelines that you need to follow to be able to really get more knowledge and be a better person in the society. So obviously all these philosophers, Marcus Garvey is also considered as a philosopher. So they are virtually saying the same thing, that you really need to burn with the desire to acquire a lot of knowledge, okay, to be able to think through situations from all angles. And there's a very important allegory in Plato's book, The Republic, and it's called the allegory of the cave. Now, in this allegory, Plato gives a scenario where you imagine that a number of people have lived all their lives in a cave. Now, this cave is a dark cave, and imagine that the people have been chained to each other, and their gaze is just focusing on the wall of the cave, and that's their whole reality, that's their whole worldview. Since they were born, they've been chained to each other, and their gaze is focused on the blank wall on the cave, and there's some fire, behind them. And when people pass in front of the cave, they see reflections of the people's shadows. Mind you, they can't turn their heads in any directions. Their heads are just faced towards the walls of the cave. Okay, and according to Plato, the people on the outside of the cave, when they pass, because of the fire, their reflection, the shadow reflects on the walls of the cave. Because of the fire outside, they see their reflections. The people in the cave see the reflections, and to them, that is their reality that they perceive, that the voices and the things they hear from behind them are just shadows of people. Now, he gives this scenario that what if one of the people who has been chained in this cave throughout his or her entire life manages to break free by some strange twist of fate, manages to break free from those chains and goes outside the cave and comes back into the cave to inform his or her fellow cave family members that the outside world is totally different from the reality we are perceiving here. What we're seeing as shadows, they are not shadows, they are real people out there. And what we thought was actually fire was not fire, but the sun. It was what we thought was fire outside behind us was the sun, and that was what was creating the reflection of the people's shadow in the cave. And according to him, if such a person manages to go outside the cave and comes back into the cave with such information, the people who have spent their entire lives in the cave will think of this person as an outcast, as somebody who has lost his or her mind, because it's totally disrupting their reality of their world or their worldview, what they've always perceived to be reality. But the person is coming back from the outside world with real information, but because their entire lives have been formed around living in the cave and seeing things from the perspective of the cave man or woman, the new information totally disrupts their reality, and they might even end up killing the person who brought the new information from the outside world. And now this allegory is teaching us about the journey to knowledge acquisition. So see yourself as somebody in the cave right now, and me, your lecturer, being the person who has gone outside to see the real world and bringing you the information. But you don't have to kill me though, because I'm bringing you good information. But that's our natural reaction to new information generally, because if you've been taught to do A, B, C, and D all your life, and I'm bringing you an alternative to live your life with the combinations of E, F, G, H, it's totally going to, upset your system of thinking. That's what philosophy does to you. It really gives you so much time to contemplate and do some serious reflection and thinking. And if you're not careful, this thinking might really disrupt your system, your natural system of thinking, because it's more like a programming, like a software for your mind. Let's say you have a Mac computer, and you've been running your computer with an old operating system, and a new operating system is installed on your Mac. Within the first few days or weeks, you try to manage yourself to navigate what this software does, what this does, and what this, and the whole operating system, the interface changes a bit. It's the same with new information coming to you. So that's why I said you need to have an open mind to be able to absorb some of this information. Some of them might not be very okay for you in the beginning stages, but then when you sit down, follow along with the readings and do some serious reflection and thinking, and reading outside the things that you are taught in class and the reading materials that you are given, you can be able to really follow along with some of these concepts. So Plato was also making other references, like, so when the person broke out of the cave and entered the real world, things were a bit disturbing to this person, because you've lived your life throughout staying in the cave, which is dark. The darkness might symbolize ignorance, and then now you go out there and there's a large expanse of the world out there waiting for you. The sun is shining in your eyes. So he says first, you can't even look at the sun with your naked eye. You'd have to see the reflection of the sun in the water, and then for some time before you can even actually look up in the sky to see the sun. So that's the same with knowledge acquisition. You start from the known to the unknown. You start small, and then you grow by learning more, getting ideas from different cultures, different sources, different societies, different people, and try to connect some of these ideas. So think of philosophy in terms of, or doing philosophy in terms of this simple allegory that I've given to you. And I'll add this to your reading list, the allegory of the cave. When you read it, I think you really understand what this whole journey of doing philosophy is all about. And it's in Velasquez's book, Philosophy, a Text with Readings, and I'll add that book to the reading list. So now you have about 4 books on your plate already, but you're not reading the entire book. I'm just directing you to specific pages, and then you can connect the dots with all what these scholars are saying. So that's it for today, and in our next lecture we'll delve deeper into some of these discussions. So, and I'll give you your first assignment. I'll add it to the reading materials, and you're supposed to do the assignment and produce it before our next lecture, which is next week. All right, so thank you very much.